Welcome to Evidence Mastery. Today, we're tackling a huge question in the world of medicine. How do we stop just reacting to evidence gaps and start proactively building the knowledge we need? In this explainer, we're going to dive right into Chapter 13 of Real-World Evidence Principles and Practice by Dr. Massoud Toussi to really unpack what a powerful RWE strategy looks like. So, let me ask you something. Are you a firefighter always rushing to put out the next evidence fire as it pops up? Or are you an architect, thoughtfully designing a solid structure from the very beginning? That's really the heart of the difference between reactive and strategic RWE. The old way was ad hoc, siloed, always putting out fires. The new way? It's about having a real roadmap, a system, where every piece of evidence is designed to be perfectly fit for its purpose. Okay, so how do we actually become those evidence architects? Well, here's our game plan for today. We're going to walk through 5 key areas. We'll start with this new way of thinking, then map out how evidence needs change over a product's life, look at the tools you need, see it all in action, and then wrap up by looking at the bigger global picture. What if I told you that evidence isn't just another report you have to deliver? What if it's actually a core strategic asset that you build and grow over time? You know, it's the difference between being a short-order cook, just reacting to tickets, versus being a master chef who designs a whole menu. That's the power of thinking strategically about evidence. And listen, this isn't just a nice idea. It's fast becoming the expectation. Regulators, like the European Medicines Agency, are now talking about needing a documented roadmap. So this isn't about some plan you just keep in your head. No. They want to see a concrete, written strategy that connects all the dots, from your main goals all the way to your specific data sources. All right, let's get to the real heart of this strategy, the evidence lifecycle. A medical product, just like a person, goes through different stages in its life. And the questions you need to answer at each stage, they are totally different. I mean, you don't ask the same questions about a toddler that you ask about a college student, right? It's the same idea here. We can actually map out this whole journey into 5 key phases. You've got the pre-approval stage, when it's just an idea, all the way to the post-patent era, long after launch. Each one of these stages has its own unique challenges, its own opportunities, and the whole way through, real-world evidence is basically our guide, helping us figure out what's next. So let's start at the beginning. Think of this pre-approval phase as your scouting mission. Before you even think about launching, you have to understand the landscape. What does this disease actually look like in the real world? What's the current standard of care? Is there a real unmet need here? RWE helps you answer all of that. And check this out. Here's a story that is just incredible. For a new ALS therapy, researchers had to find patients with a really specific gene mutation, only about 2% of them. Using RWE, they found them. It was like finding a needle in a haystack, and it made a pivotal trial possible that might have otherwise taken 10 years. I mean, wow, that's RWE turning the impossible into the possible. Okay, so you've got a promising product, it's getting close to the finish line. But now, the questions get a lot more practical, don't they? How much is this thing actually going to cost the healthcare system? Who's going to pay for it? And can we make sure it's used safely once it's out there? These are exactly the kinds of tough questions RWE is built to answer. You know, those first few years after a product launches are kind of like the honeymoon phase being over. Everyone is watching very closely. Regulators need to see that it's being used safely and appropriately. Payers want to know if it's actually providing the value they're paying for. And of course, the big question from everyone is this really better than what we already have? Now, this is a total game changer. For the cancer drug pembrolizumab, they used real-world data and found that the response rate out in the wild was almost identical to what was seen in the clinical trial. That's like hitting a grand slam. It provided crucial support for a major approval that has really changed cancer treatment. So now we're in what you might call the long-term relationship phase. The initial buzz is gone, and now it's all about sustained value. This is when you start answering the really tough questions you couldn't answer at the beginning. What are the long-term effects? Does it work better for certain kinds of patients? Does staying on the therapy actually lead to better outcomes? And you might think, well, when the patent expires, the story's over, right? Not so fast. Real-world evidence is kind of like a secret agent, always digging up new intel. It can help us understand how generics are being used, discover completely new uses for old drugs, and even track the public health impact of a therapy over many, many years. Okay, so we've seen how the evidence needs change all the time. But how do we actually generate that evidence? Well, it's kind of like being a detective. You need the right tool for the right job. You wouldn't try to dust for fingerprints with a telescope, would you? And this is super important. This isn't a one and done process. It's really a cycle, a conversation. You start by asking, okay, who needs this evidence and what decision are they trying to make? From there, you figure out the best way to answer their question. And if the data isn't quite right, you go back and adjust. It's a constant process of learning and adapting. I like to think of this as a matchmaking service for evidence. You have a very specific need, and you have to find the perfect pairing of a study design and a data source to meet it. So, for example, if you want to understand the epidemiology of a disease, you might look backwards in time using a disease registry. But for a major safety question, you might need a huge perspective network. It's all about finding the right partner for the right dance. Okay, theory is great, but let's make this all a bit more concrete. We're going to look at a real-world case study. And, just like any journey, it's also important to know about the common wrong turns people can take. Let's imagine a plan for a blockbuster drug like semaglutide. You can see how the story builds. Early on, it's all about showing regulators the scale of the problem. Then, once it's launched, it's about proving to payers that it's effective in their populations. And later on, as a mature product, it's about demonstrating that when patients actually stick with the therapy, they see better outcomes. The story just keeps evolving. But, of course, even the best roadmap has potential pitfalls, right? There are these common mistakes that can completely derail an otherwise brilliant strategy. So what are those wrong turns we absolutely have to avoid? And these aren't just little slip-ups. We're talking about major strategic blunders, like trying to track long-term safety using social media data. That's the wrong tool for the job. Another big one is what we call latency blindness, using data that's 2 years old to understand how doctors are treating patients today. It's like using an old map. The key is always to pick the right tool and be super aware of the context. All right, for our last piece here, let's zoom all the way out and look at the big picture. Because here's the thing, the rules of the road for RWE are not the same everywhere. A strategy that's perfect for one part of the world might fall completely flat in another. So how do we handle that? You can almost think of it like this. In the EU, regulators are often like strict parents. They have a high bar and they really value prospectively collected data from things like registries. In the US, the FDA can sometimes be more like a cool uncle. They are more open to well-conducted retrospective studies using existing data, especially from EHRs. The bottom line, you absolutely have to know your audience and tailor your plan. So after all of this, what's the one big idea I really want you to walk away with? It's this core concept, fitness for purpose. It's not about which study design is at the top of some rigid hierarchy. It's about picking the right design and the right data to answer a specific question for a specific decision maker. That, right there, that's the secret sauce. That's evidence mastery. Because when we really embrace this fitness for purpose idea, we stop just generating data points and we start creating real, actionable knowledge. We're not just answering abstract questions, we're helping to improve health. If you're ready to become an evidence master yourself, I really encourage you to go deeper with these concepts in real-world evidence, principles, and practice, which is available now on Amazon.com.